Hi. Hello. Welcome.
Hi.
Hi, how's it going?
Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. We still have a couple of folks joining this session, so I'm going to give it like one more minute, and then we can get started. My name is Rachel Lighty, and I'm going to be leading today's training session. Let's see. Okay, and can you see FutureFeed right now, the FutureFeed homepage?
Yes.
All right, let me get logged in. Okay. All right, so in today's training session, I am going to be covering the dashboard area, FutureFeed, start area, people, tools, and documents, and then we're going to stop there. The second session, then we cover assess, SSP, your FutureFeed plan of actions, and milestones and deliverables. So today we'll just get up to documents. Then after, I always recommend that you take some time to take what, you learned in today's session and apply it in the application for some hands-on learning. Then once you feel comfortable or you're ready for the next session, when you log into FutureFeed, scroll to the bottom of the page, you can get to our training page here. So you can register for that second session. You can also register for this session again as many times as you need. Today's session is being recorded though, so about an hour after I hang up or end the meeting today, you should get a link emailed to you to that recording. And another thing I want to mention is this 15 minutes with FutureFeed. And you guys can see my screen moving around, right?
Yep.
Okay. So this 15 minutes with FutureFeed session here, this is a Thursday session. Every Thursday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. It's like open office hours with myself. So if you are stuck, like anything FutureFeed related, you can ask it there. Anything about CMMC or the regulations, we also talk about that kind of stuff. So feel free to join that session if you want to listen in, or if you have like a question that week, just pop into that meeting and I can help you. You only have to register for that one once, and it will be on your calendar every Thursday. Another place you can get help desk information is up here in the right-hand corner, upper right-hand corner of the screen. Click on the little user icon, and then you can get to the help center. You may have to, if you've not been here before, you will have to create an account. It's free. It's a FutureFeed site. So you'd create an account, and then sometimes you do have to occasionally log back in. Okay. All right. So here's then where you can search for keywords, and this is where we post any articles, how-tos, user manuals. And then the last thing, the last area you can look for answers related to FutureFeed is in the individual pages themselves. Most of the pages, like if I go to people page, here we're on manage users. So here's manage users information. Why we're capturing that information, how it's being used, how you recommendations on how to fill out that information. And then now I'm over on the manage roles page. So the getting started guide is going to show me manage roles stuff. So it does, these getting started guides, they change and it's only going to show you the information related to the page you are on. All right, so that's all the places where you can go to get information. Of course, you could also email support@futurefeed.co. That will create a help desk ticket with our ticketing system and someone will get you a response. All right, so I'm going to get started. You can stop me along the way, shout, feel free to interrupt me. Or there is a chat area. I am working on one screen right now, so I may not see the chat right away, but I will check it towards the end of the meeting. So this dashboard page here. Of course, when I first log into my environment, I get presented with this compliance dashboard. It is just a nice infographic, interactive. You can drill down to control objective level and even jump to the assess page or the system security plan page for that objective, that requirement. Inheritance, some status over here. So just really nice metrics. Then you have the assessment prep center. So this was a recent ad, and what we've done is we've created a way for you guys to be able to assign pages of FutureFeed to other users in your environment for the purpose of having them review that content that's being captured in that section of FutureFeed, make sure it's accurate, doesn't need updating, and approving that content. So this assessment prep center, all of these hyperlink to the actual page. We do refer to our pages in FutureFeed as subway stops. So up here, we refer to this menu up here as the subway line, and you would stop at each subway stop, filling out that data that's being captured. So we do refer to these sections here, these pages, as subway stops. So back to that assessment prep center, these subway stops are pages in FutureFeed. For example, let me go to the contract manager page. So I click on it, it will bring me to that area of FutureFeed. So here, I can assign this page to someone. They could then log in and review it. If you mark it reviewed, it's going to capture whoever's logged in and marked it reviewed. So Carrie would want to review it probably. And then you can even approve it. Okay, so maybe for this contracts page and where it captures your cage code and your contract information, you would assign this to maybe your contract manager or sales marketing department. So this little compliance review box here, it relates directly to this assessment prep. So if I go back here, contract manager, it was approved by me today. Okay, it's just like a nice view of all of those little compliance review tables that you see up here. All of these are in one page for you to review them or get the status or assign them in one page. So you might want to use this assessment prep center to just validate that your information is accurate and updated in FutureFeed before moving into any like official assessment cycle, whether it's an internal assessment or external assessment. Critical dates, this is planning, again, project planning, capturing when you plan to start working on NIST SP 800-171 requirements and implementing the requirements. Then when are you going to plan to have a C3PO engagement? They're going to have their assessment. If you had findings during that assessment, you have 180 days to get them implemented and revalidated. So you'd track that date. So this is just more project management. Once you get a certification, then it's a triennial requirement to get recertified every 3 years. So, all right, then you have team responsibilities and individual responsibilities. So all throughout FutureFeed, it's a compliance management tool. You're assigning responsibilities for different things. And to view what is assigned to you or assigned to a team member, you would use these two pages here, for example. And this is just a training environment I'm in. But here I'm assigned the controls. So these are the requirements. I've been assigned as consulted for all of these ones. Tools, services, documentation. Up here, then you can also see all the tasks that you have open, operational tasks, and all my poem items that are assigned to me are listed here. The poem items and the different poem projects. If you're in the business of checking in on your team members or in a management position, then here's where you would see theirs. You could just click on their name and it will drill down. Now I'm seeing Jill's tasks, poems, and racy assignments. Oops. Okay, so that is the dashboard area. Assessment prep center, responsibilities, and a compliance dashboard. Then in the start area, so here's where you start to define company information, your system scope or system information, again, contracts, cage code, the type of data, the type of sensitive data you're protecting in this environment, and then some settings related to FutureFeed. So we can go through those. Does anybody have any questions so far on what I covered on the dashboards, in the dashboards area? All right, so company information, pretty self-explanatory here. I have it filled out, somewhat filled out with a fake contracting company that makes secure muffins. So logo, address, down here, risk appetite. So what this area is you're identifying for your company what is your approach to handling risk. And you would just select based on the description here where your organization sits. There's some little bubbles you can hover over to get some more information, and then also note to refer to the getting started guide where it will kind of talk through the risk appetite as well. So this comes into play when you start working in your system poems, okay? When you have a listing of non-compliance or vulnerabilities in your system poem, your company needs to start remediating those things and working on them. Well, that prioritization occurs based on several factors like effort, impact, cost, risk to the company, that type of stuff. Company description, pretty self-explanatory again. NIAX codes, size, describe the company. Down here, you have a place to track your cybersecurity budget and cybersecurity insurance provider and type of insurance, coverage dates, that type of stuff. Locations, this is an important area because you start to define your assessment scope. Okay, your scope should depict or should accurately identify all those assets that are stored or transmitting CUI data, FCI data, and those assets that are protecting it, and a few other things. And so an asset is a location, a person, or a thing like some technology. So locations are an asset in the world of CMMC. They would be physical assets. And here's where you start to define that assessment scope. Unless you could be in an all cloud environment, in which case you may not have a physical presence that you're responsible for anyway. So you just new location, add the new location, provide some basic details, and then after you add a new location, make it a point to open up the location inventory item. Okay, I refer to these as inventory items all throughout FutureFeed. Here are 2 location inventory items. If I go up to tools, here are all my technology inventory items, and then documents, here are my document inventory items. And think of the inventory item as like a folder almost. Okay, because this is the headquarters folder. Now I open it up and there's a lot of different subfolders, tabs, sections here, places where you can upload documents, provide more detail, assign responsibility, identify the requirements that are being implemented in this asset. So this would be your physical security requirements. And then another place to upload more evidence. So think of these as like folder inventory items, okay? And when you create an inventory item, then the next step would be to open it, get it responsibility assigned. So all throughout FutureFeed, we're using this RACI model for responsibility, assignment, and tracking. R stands for who's responsible, A, accountable, C, consulted, I, informed. Um, Definitely strongly recommend at least having one or two of these objectives filled out. No worries if you don't have them all, all four of them associated with a team or a role. What else? So connect, I will actually, I'm going to hold off on going over connect, compliance, task, assignment, and evidence, these four sections. I will go over them when we get into a technology inventory item as opposed to a locations inventory item, just because I feel like it's a better discussion. All right, so add new location, then open up the location and fill out that metadata. Then you have maintenance and ownership. This is at a high level. Who owns the hardware and software being utilized by the company and who maintains that hardware and software. So here's, I guess there's no need to pause here. I was going to say this is how I'd write it up, but go up into the getting started guides and in the compliance implications section, I've provided an example of how I'd probably write that up. Scope, another important area of FutureFeed. So here, a lot of this information you're going to put here is building out that top section of your system security plan. If you want to know if it is going into your system security plan, this little asterisk here is a pretty good indicator that that information you're inputting is going to be populating your SSP. So system unique identifier, the type of system, CIA impacts, number of users, and then defining your boundary, defining the purpose of the system. If you want guidance on the CIA impact ratings and scope, again, refer to the Getting Started guides. I guess, just for our CMMC folks on the call, people trying to protect CY data and having to implement a level 2, you'd want to at least leave this confidentiality rating to a moderate. You can move it up to a high. Moderate or high, I would say, is acceptable from my point of view as an assessor. Low would not really align with the control set you're applying in NIST 800-171. Contracts here, this is where you're capturing the cage code or cage codes. You can have multiple associated with this environment, this NIST SP 800-171 compliant environment. In contracts, this is where you would identify all those contracts. Specifically, I guess the important part for me anyway would be these contract clauses. I'd want to know the contracts my company holds that have these clauses present in them. That means that those contracts require that data to be stored, processed, or transmitted in my NIST 800-171 compliant environment. So, but all of this, I'm sure, is important to someone. So fill out the contract information and add your cage code or cage codes. Data inventory. So here's where you start to identify that type of data you're trying to protect. So is this environment just an FCI environment? Is it a level 1 environment? I guess this would be a good time to just note up here, you can toggle between the different control sets or require frameworks. Depending, it depends what your company's subscribed to. This training environment is also subscribed to 853 and Rev 3, but if you're not subscribed to those, you're not going to see those in your drop-down. So, but a level 1 would be your FCI environment, or it could be part of your level 2 environment. The thing to note here is on this page, you're just selecting the technology you have at your company that is storing, processing, or transmitting FCI data. So it's a yes or no. Now, your area here in FutureFeed, this FCI data inventory page is probably going to be blank. You do have to go up into the tools section of FutureFeed to add that data. You add the tools here. Once you add the tools here, go back to the FCI page and then yes or no if they are an FCI asset. Your CUI data inventory page looks a little bit differently. Here we're listing out all of the CUI categories provided by NARA, and you would just select the data type you're working with. So hold on one second. Okay. So it's just checking the box. You know, my company does have toxic substance CUI specified data. Checking the box. How the rent shows up like this, okay? Here I'm saying that these 5 assets are storing, processing, or transmitting controlled technical information data. How I'm making this wrench show up is when in my tools area, let me jump there quick. I have to open up one of my tool inventory items. So let's do my future feed entry. And in this compliance field is where you can identify down here specific CUI categories as being stored, transmitted, and processed in this technology. You do have to have the categorization of the asset as a CUI asset, though. So let's just pretend FutureFeed in here is a CUI asset. But note, you should not put CUI data into FutureFeed. We do not yet have FedRAMP moderate equivalency. But I could talk about that later. Anyway, it has to be a CUI asset in order for you then to be able to click on this little icon. Now, if I click on that icon and I check these boxes for example purposes. Now, if I go back to my CUI data inventory page, if I click on these, now I should see FutureFeed listed here. Which ones did I do? I did them both. Hold on. Let me refresh the page. Sometimes a little too fast for it. Let's see. Did I click the wrong one? Or is this a bug? Okay, let's check back on that. Come back to this at the end. That is how you normally establish it. That's how I got all of these to work. So I'm wondering what's going on. Sensitive data inventory had other information was worried, protect other than FCI or CUI data. Here's where you identify that on the bottom. You could create even new categories. If you have HIPAA data, privacy data, create all those categories if you want to track that other type of information in this environment. Settings, here you have the capability to integrate FutureFeed with your ticketing system. You do have to have this enabled, and then you would put the email address to your ticketing system here. Then you could send email notifications for POEM items and projects directly from FutureFeed. So I'll show you where that happens. If I go up here to your FutureFeed and zoom out. Oh, I got filters on. So here, over here, this little envelope icon, this is where you could send an email to your ticketing system for this POEM item. Okay, so wherever that capability is built in, you'll see this little envelope icon. You're emailing the ticketing system. Let's go back to platform settings. POAM goals. So in FutureFeed, there are several things that will trigger POAMs to be created, POAM items or POAM entries to be created, and those POAM entries will have a default due date. Here's how you control what that due date is. So if I made a POAM item today, it would be due 3 quarters out. And you can change the due date within the individual POAM items. I'll show you that later in the second training, but they will all come pre-populated with the due date. Organizational scale. So again, this information is specific to your FutureFeed plan of action or POAM. For any non-compliance or any POAM items, non-compliance, system flaws, vulnerabilities, you're going to identify impact, effort, and cost. So here's where you're standardizing and defining the scale for your organization. So what is cost? What does a low cost item look like for your company? What's a high cost item look like for your company? And that's different for all companies, depending what your budget is. Okay. Framework, you could disable the FedRAMP warning that pops up. You have to be an admin to do that, and that's only recommended if you don't have FedRAMP requirements for your organization. So that's the start area. So then people. So people is where you're starting. You're going to create FutureFeed accounts here. You're going to log individuals or create a record for individuals that have some sort of responsibility for implementing the requirements or maintaining compliance. You're going to define security related roles. Again, those roles, think about the NIST 800-171 requirements and think about the roles that are involved with getting those requirements enforced and implemented and maintained, in a compliant state. So you're defining those security related personnel and the security related roles and the security related teams here, as well as creating FutureFeed access accounts. You have to be an administrator to add new users or modify some user settings. But this is also where you just create records of other individuals at your company that, for example, like HR, maybe you have an HR person and they are responsible for providing the user onboarding training. So in your compliance management system, you're going to want to identify that person as being responsible for user onboarding cybersecurity training. And to be able to tag that person by name or role or part of a team, you have to create them in FutureFeed. So you'd give them no access. So you're just creating a record for them. You're listing them out in FutureFeed. They don't have access to FutureFeed though, for the purpose of responsibility assignment. Then over here, you would define the security related roles for your company. We do have a few defaults. If you don't want to use them, just mark them not applicable with that little power icon. But you just assign people, compliance team member. Now see the people listed in this dropdown? That's because back here under manage users, I had to create them an entry. And now I can select them over here. Okay. Some of these roles here, the ones that you say are applicable, they will show up in the system security plan though, some of these. So just note, I always recommend when you get access to FutureFeed, put some data into FutureFeed and then go run a system security plan report. So that way you can really see the layout and all of the information that gets captured and presented in that SSP.
Rachel, can you hear me?
Yep, I can.
I'm sorry. Did you say we were going to have a link to a recording of this? Because I'm getting lost. You're going really fast.
Oh,
So
sorry.
I'm going to have to do it and be able to stop and look at the same time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
Yes, you will get a link to today's recording. It's being recorded.
Right.
Also note, I am working on recording individual training videos. I know this is a lot to take in, so I have like I'm creating one video for this section, one video for this section. So that's going to be slowly rolled out over the next couple months, but I just started working on those because I do understand your frustration. But sign up for as many trainings as you need, and you will get a recording. Um, Manage teams. So over here is where you're defining security related teams. You can see here I got some HR team. So now let's use that example that I said that we had someone in HR who was doing user onboarding cybersecurity training. I would just create the HR team and then go add or remove members, add that person to this team or persons if there's multiple, select a team member. And now in FutureFeed, I could assign the training requirements either to the HR team. Any member then of this team will see those responsibilities as being assigned. Or I could assign them directly to Jill over here if she had a role over here as maybe training, HR training, or we could just say HR, so Jill. The tip is here in FutureFeed, when you assign responsibility, to try to always assign responsibility to a role or a team. And that's for the purpose of maintaining uh, communication of requirements and handling personnel turnover. So, for example, if Jeff, he's my incident team lead. So, let's pretend that I have assigned Jeff responsibility for the incident response requirements. Okay, there's 3 of them in the incident response requirements. Let's say I assign them all to Jeff. Well, if Jeff leaves the company, then I have to go into those requirements and reassign them to someone else. Whereas if I assigned all of the IR incident response requirements to this role and I tied it with the role, then if Jeff leaves, all I got to do is come in here, identify the person who's picked up those responsibilities. Let's say Carrie has. Now, when Carrie logs into FutureFeed, she's going to see all of the things Jeff was previously working on because the responsibilities just shifted to her. Okay. Same thing with teams over here. Let's say Jill leaves the company. Well, all I got to do is come in here, remove Jill, add whoever else was hired. And now Mina and Nate still see the requirement of doing user onboarding training because we associated that requirement with the team title, with the team itself, and not individual people. So that would be my recommendation for compliance continuity is making sure when you assign responsibility in FutureFeed, you do it to either a role or a team if possible. So that way you don't have to worry about going into FutureFeed and getting someone. Um, Let me tell you about this populate function here real quick. And to do that, I want to go over to CMMC documentation. This is the DoD CIO's CMMC website. If you have not seen it, you can just Google search DoD CIO CMMC documents. This resource page is like a one-stop shop. Oops, I accidentally clicked one. For everything CMMC. So in here, I want to show you this assessment guide. This is a level 2 assessment guide. Any C3PAO assessor who's going to evaluate your environment is going to follow this guide. Okay, so here's one requirement. This is for 318, limit unsuccessful logon attempts. That's a requirement. And in the assessor's guide, it says potentially you could interview people with information security responsibilities. You could interview a system developer or a system and network administrator, right? It's basically saying typically These are the type of people who are responsible for doing this requirement in the environment. And so whenever we saw like system and network administrator, let's focus on that. If I go back to future feed and I click on this populate button, if you want to quickly build out cyber teams, security related teams, and then divvy up the requirements to those teams, I would use this bulk team creation, or it's called the populate. What they are is they're pre-built teams in future feed. So let me go. Here's we have one for system and network administrators. So they're pre-built teams, and this system and network administrator is associated to these 79 requirements. And here's my 381. Because system and network administrator was mentioned under all 79 of these controls in this assessor's guide. If I went to the 318 or 317 requirement here, um, system developers, I guess they lumped them in, system developers. 319, if that one's technical, system and network administrator. So, um, for example, if you're just getting started with working on NIST 800-171 and you still are at the early stages of trying to identify whose responsibility is what and if we're compliant or not, then you might want to just create these teams. Let's say you have one or two system administrators at your company, then you would create this team, go to that team. Do I have it here? Go to the team and then add the people to this team. And now when those people log into FutureFeed, they're going to see those 79 requirements as being assigned to them for review and answering. Um, so that's the people page. I got two more sections here, and I'll try to cover them and leave some time for questions at the end. So tools and documents, I'm going to go over these two together. The page layout is very similar, okay? In tools and documents, what you're doing is you're creating inventory item records, okay? So in the tools area, you're going to log or create a record for all of the technology that your company is, owns, manages, operates, utilizes, okay? Specific to think of your environment. I've had clients, I've seen where future feed customers, they choose to define everything owned, operated, managed by the company, and then really rely on this internal flag area here under the compliance to then further categorize um, the asset, because you can say it's a CUI asset and even out of scope. So I've seen it where future feed users decide to define everything in future feed, all of the assets the company owns, manages, utilizes, and then for those things that are not part of your compliance boundary or need to implement NIST 800-171, if appropriately separated logically and physically, you could say they're out of scope. I like me personally, I would recommend doing that. I would log everything and then rely on these category here to say what's in scope of the requirements and what's out of scope. Why I would do that is just because then if I say that this, let's pretend I can't do it on this one without making a few changes. If I go to this one here and I say that this is out of scope, my this asset over in their interview section in this description area, I would define why I'm saying out of scope. So I would capture that analysis that I'm doing. So that way, because sometimes when you make these determinations of categorization, you may wait years or months or maybe a year or more for your assessment, and so documenting the analysis and your thought process, your rationale in future feed then is only going to support when you need to have that conversation again when you meet with that C3PAO assessor and they want to learn about your assessment scope. They want to know what you said was in scope and what you said was out of scope. If you define it, then you could even potentially upload evidence as to why you say that's out of scope. And again, it has to be logically or physically, separated. So maybe it's some evidence of logical separation, like a virtual LAN, ACL rule set configuration. Um, so in tools, you're logging your technology, software, technology, services, vendors, specialized equipment, maybe CNC machines, 3D printers, all that contractor uh, building stuff. And then it's up to you if you want to just define what you know is part of your assessment scope or compliance boundary, or if you want to define everything and then rely on that out of scope flag, your call. But in this area, in this tools area, you want to start adding your IT, your technology assets here. You just hit add, type out the mission. So what is that thing doing for your company? Let's say multi-factor authentication. And then the brand, let's say I'm using Duo MFA, and then hit add. There's two areas in both the tools section and the document section. There's two areas to the page. You have active things. These are active tools and services. That means those are in production. We're already using them. If I scroll down, then you have, oops, sorry, scroll down. Then you have pending. So these are things you are planning to acquire, or you're maybe working on configuring them and going to deploy, they're still in this test dev phase. These are things not yet in production. Okay. Same thing with documents. You have two sections. Active documents, these are implemented, enforced, approved documentation. Down here, this is pending, draft, is still in development documents. So if I create something here, okay, then I'm putting it on my system POAM. So let's say, for example, you don't have an access control policy, but you need one or you would like one. Then I'm going to say access control policy. I'm going to make it's a policy. And now I have just created a POAM entry item. If I click on this, then it is on my system POAM, and it's got a due date of March 30th, 2026. You can change that due date by clicking on it. You can do quarter or specific dates or quarters. Okay. If you accidentally make an entry in the wrong area, it's just related to this area. So if, let's say I made this in the pending area, but it's actually an approved document, I just hit it to active and it will remove it from my system POAM. But let's say you do need an access control policy and you want to use one of FutureFeed templates. Here's how you get to them one way. You open up the inventory item, click on this plus sign, go to templates. Let's say you want to use this access control policy template. So no, what's going on here? Hold on. It's usually not this many problems, but I have gotten a bad internet connection once or twice. I wonder if that's the issue. Okay, it was doing it, but it froze. But you see now I opened it up and now there's actually text in here. This is that template. So I can view the template, or if I want to start editing it, click on the edit icon. So let's make an edit quick. I'm going to make this authorized by myself just for example purposes. So now let's say this document is good to go. It's been edited. It's tailored to my environment. We love it. We're going to start using it. Every time you hit publish up here, you make a version. So it does track version history. If you go over to the history tab, here's all the different versions I have. Um, and you can restore back to old versions if you want to. But so here, let's say this is good to go. So now in my document inventory item under this task assignment, I'm going to create a task. I'm going to say, I want my CISO to review and approve this document. I assign it to the CISO. It doesn't need to repeat. Give them a due date. All right, submit. Now this person who I assign this task to will get notification that they have a task in FutureFeed, and they log into FutureFeed, they click on the task, and it presents them. In this case, it's going to present them, because we're in a document item, and will present them this live document, the latest working version of the document. If I click on it, you'll see that my edits are there. So let's say this is good to go. We love it. It's good to go. So I'm going to hit save, complete. Now I'm signing. It's CISO approved, good to go, mark complete. Now it's going to kick me out of the task area, and it's going to move me. See, we were in this task area, but now it moved me to this evidence area. Um, and there's my approved. I can't, this is now a PDF. I can't make edits. I can download the document PDF, and it has the approval date and timestamp there. So a little bit more about this overview section. When it comes to documentation and FutureFeed, you guys,
Rachel,
yep.
can you show again where you go to sign?
Yes, you have to have a task open. So it's when you're closing out a task, you mark that it's either, watch, I'll show you. Let's create this real quick. So clicking on this, I can there's a couple different things I could do there. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but save. If I'm not done, it would be save and in progress. If it's good to go and I'm done, save and complete. As soon as I hit save and complete, then it prompts me for my signature.
Okay.
So it's when you complete tasks.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. If it wasn't good to go and maybe there was work needed still, then I hit save and in progress. And now I could reassign back to someone else. Maybe I have to have someone else provide input or review it. You could just kind of reassign that one task to individuals until the document's ready, good to go. And then the last person who wants to approve that document would hit save and complete. Back in this overview page here, there's several sections, or there's several things that you guys can decide for documentation. You can decide to use FutureFeed's live document editor, or you can decide if you don't want to use that, you can just attach the documentation. In this case, I would attach the approved access control policy. Or you can put a link to that document if you have it maybe in your SharePoint or something. Just click on the three dots and there's a link icon in here. So you can add a URL link to where that document is housed. So document management system, you'll have to make, and maybe you just use a combination of all three. It depends what document it is, but I'm showing you that there's three different things you can do. You can create, edit documents, manage them in FutureFeed with this live document editor, attach them, or provide URL links. Kind of went off on a tangent there, but let's go back. So in tools and in documents, what you'll do is you will add the items. So you'll record all your technology and you'll make entries for all your security documentation, whether it's active or pending. So in both, here's in documents, it's the same way. Add a document, categorize it, and add it. So after you add that technology or you add that security documentation, then what you'll do next is you'll open up the inventory item and start filling out the metadata, exactly what you what we talked about with the location inventory item. So again, once you create an inventory item for a location, a tool, or a document, then you'll open it up and fill out this metadata. And in here, you're assigning responsibility. This connect thing, I'll come right back to. You're creating tasks and then you're also housing evidence. Talking a little bit more about this tasks quick. You will start creating tasks for things that need to happen to get things compliant. So tasks related to that implementation activity, getting documents signed, getting tools deployed, getting assets configured compliantly, all of those things to get compliant. But then you're also going to start creating tasks for the things that have to happen throughout the year. So once you get compliant, you have to remain compliant. So, for example, in this incident response plan inventory item, if you're aware, in the incident response requirements, there's a requirement for you to do an annual test of your incident response capability. So, an annual incident response plan test. So in this one is where maybe I would make this this task of an annual IRP test, incident response plan test. And I would assign it to the right people who are responsible for kicking that off. We'll give it to the IT department, maybe. And then here we're going to make this one repeat. We're going to make it repeat yearly. So I want it to repeat every year, starting today, never ending. And when the task is triggered, how many days do they have to complete that activity? This one will give them like a full 14 days because it's a lot to schedule and get that done and hit submit. So now I'm going to have a trigger in FutureFeed that's every year it's going to alert someone, hey, it's time for the annual incident response test. So think of everything that needs to happen throughout the year. Weekly vulnerability scans or monthly vulnerability scans, whatever you defined as the frequency, you're going to have to do vulnerability scanning throughout the year. Change control meetings, maybe a monthly change control board meeting, a quarterly configuration baseline review, and quarterly access control review, something, all those things to remain compliant. You'll create those tasks in FutureFeed, but make sure the task is assigned to the right thing. Like I'm in the incident response plan area. I wouldn't create a task in here to do an annual risk assessment. I would create that in my risk assessment procedure or my risk assessment checklist. Okay. So that's the tasks. And then when you complete the tasks, it will ask you to upload a new document, maybe, or I'm sorry, create a new document. So maybe you just want to create a after action report and just like type up, here's how it went, here's what went wrong, yada, yada, yada. Or maybe you want to attach if you produced a after action report or some sort of official report, you can upload that evidence into FutureFeed, or you could link to where the evidence that that activity was completed. Okay, so here, when you go out to close a task, having you or create the evidence that that task was completed. So FutureFeed's going to eventually have a listing of completed activity that you show an assessor that you're completing the activity that's required throughout the year. And it's also going to have evidence that your activity was completed. Okay. As you complete those. The connect thing here. So this real quick is where you start making associations between your technology or the documents and the requirements. So here I'm in the incident response plan. I would connect it to the incident response plan requirements. Sorry. So that's 311 No, what is the incident response? 3.6. So 3.6, in the 3.6, there's incident reporting. I need to have incident response testing, and then there's incident handling. So I created an incident response plan to address all three of these requirements. So you connect them. And now in FutureFeed, if I go to one of these, I'll go to the 3.6.2 requirement over here. I'm gonna find that my incident response plan is now tagged down below. If I scroll down where I find the evidence, it's right here. There's my incident response plan. And it's under the 3.6.2. So that's what you're doing, is creating um, uh, relationships between your evidence and the requirements. You're building out that evidence, that body of evidence. So here's another example. Let me get rid of all these real quick. So here's, I have a vulnerability scanning procedure document item. And I'm going to teach you about this leader and follower. It's creating tags, establishing document relationships. I want this vulnerability scanning procedure to be um, associated with the vulnerability scanning requirements. So like I showed you, those are the 3.11 requirements. 3.11.2, there's a vulnerability scanning requirement. There's another one for vulnerability remediation. So here I just connected those two. But if you don't want to connect them this way, you can connect controls by establishing followers and leaders. So let's say my company has a policy that states I have to do vulnerability scanning. And so I created this procedure to make sure my vulnerability scanning requirements are done on time and the same way every time. So if I connect my policy, my risk, let's pretend my risk management policy here, this one at the way bottom, which I cannot click on because there's a button in the way. But let's pretend that this risk management policy is the policy that says, hey, you have to do vulnerability scanning and you have to have a vulnerability scanning procedure. So I want to associate these two. But when I do that, now this risk management policy is connected. If I click on it, it will bring me to that inventory item document. Here it is. It's connected to all these controls here. Let me go back to my vulnerability scanning procedure one. So if I connect the risk management policy to my procedures, I'm going to inherit all 14 of the connected controls. All of the controls that are connected to this policy will be automatically connected to this procedure, as shown here, all these connections. See, it says controls inherited from leader. Well, during an assessment, I don't want to give my vulnerability scanning procedures, that document, as evidence for my system security plan requirement, the 3.12.4 one right here. Nor do I want to give it for my malicious code protection, because that's my malware. It's something different. Well, so my policy is connected to these 14 controls because my policy covers all of these things. So instead of making it a leader, I might want to make it a follower. A risk management. I'll make it a follower because I still want this vulnerability scanning document associated with my risk management policy. But now I won't inherit all of those connections. Do you see? There's no connections up here. So you only inherit connections, requirement connections from your leaders. And so instead of me individually tagging these, maybe instead I'll link something else that has, let's see. I can't because I don't have a good example. But just know you can connect things here like this. Or if you associate a document or an item with a leader, then you'll pull in those connections. And so maybe if I had a vulnerability scanning policy specific and it just had a couple tags, I would have linked those, but I wouldn't link it this way. Does that make sense? I'll show you if I go to my tools and I go to my Nessus vulnerability scanner, here's my vulnerability scanner. So this one, maybe I'll want to connect it. See how I don't have any tags right now, but this one is where I would connect it to my vulnerability scanning procedure. Okay. See now how automatically I have this vulnerability tool is now associated with 3.11.2 and 3.11.3 because those are the two controls associated with my procedure. While I'm using this tool, this is the tool I'm going to be using to finish this procedure. So just play around with the leader follower thing, relationship model a little bit. It takes a little bit to learn, but then once you figure it out, you can establish connections between the requirements and your evidence a little bit more quickly and manage them in a better way as well. So that's the end of the training. I'm over now, but I'll answer some questions quick. But what you're going to do here, just to wrap it up, in the tools and documents area, is you're going to start logging your tools, IT assets, software, technology, major applications, specialized assets. You're going to log all your technology and log all of your security documentation. Create all of the inventory items, all these items here, by clicking the add button, and then open them up and fill out the metadata. Important that you get responsibility assigned and you establish connections with the requirements, because what you're doing is you're building out your evidence, and when you get to the assess page, all of your requirements then will be associated with people and technology and the different assets already, as shown down here we talk about in the next session. And just remember that you have active, a section for active, and then you have a section for pending. If you don't want something, I'm going to archive this access control policy here by archive. When you hit archive, then all of they're found down here, and you can always go recover them or delete them permanently.
Rachel, quick question, or two quick questions, really.
Mhm.
So is there any way, if we already have, I mean, I have a listing of all my hardware assets or all of my users, et cetera, right? I have that in Excel or something. Is there no way for me to just upload that from Excel into FutureFeed, or do I have to hand jam every single line? Because that's a lot of data to have to put into the system.
There is no automated import capability at this time, unfortunately. I'm sorry. It is
All right.
quite a bit. I understand your frustration. I've had to do it, but once you get them in there, then it's just maintaining them. And every time there's new assets introduced, or maybe assets get decommissioned, then you'll just think of it also as like a asset management tool. FutureFeed can be if used
No,
appropriately.
I realize that, but I mean, between the users and the assets, I mean, you're talking hundreds, if not thousands of pieces of data that have to be added into FutureFeed
Mhm.
in order for it to function. I don't think FutureFeed's not a Summit 7 tool, correct? Isn't it? I think it's some other,
Right, right.
yeah.
It's an application that they're
Yeah, I mean, if you wouldn't mind sharing that with the application developers, that it would be most useful to the end users if there was that functionality, because I don't know any of us probably that are on this call or on any call that have hours and hours that we or even some of our staff people can spend hand jamming data into another spreadsheet after they already probably put it into the
that
first
wrong.
spreadsheet.
Yeah, yeah. I will bring that back to them. I think we've had that request, and I can see where it is in the pipeline for sure.
Okay. And then my other question is and where would we add the MSPs back to, like, your assets? Is an MSP considered an asset, or are they considered a vendor? I asked that because I think when I did my initial FutureFeed walkthrough, I thought that the person who did my walkthrough said to add them as an asset, but like if you click on the add button to add like an active tools and services,
Mhm.
when I click on that plus button that's right next to the export, it pops up like a couple of windows that says like mission and something else,
Mhm.
which doesn't make sense to me in that context.
So, and I did reshare my screen. Can you see it?
Yep.
Okay. So, um, you do have to be in the right category. So if I add something over here in online, it's just going to allow
Yeah.
me. Okay, so you get that. So over here under service providers where you would add them.
See, it still says mission and brand model.
Yeah, yeah.
That
It,
doesn't. I mean, if you can
title.
define what those are, that's great. It just doesn't make sense to me in the context of even how the data ends up listed down below.
Yeah. So here's how we did MSP compliance consulting would be the mission. And then for brand and model, I just company of the name of the company.
Okay, so the name of the
I can
company and
put
then
them in
MSP.
here.
Okay.
Yes. Service providers, you can add them as, vendor would be a slightly different definition, but service providers, there's a place for vendors. And then under people, for teams, I would probably create a team for my external service provider. The people we're contacting or doing whatever services we're paying them for.
All right. Is there a preferred place to add the MSPs, whether it's as an asset as a service provider or if it's under vendors? Does it make a difference, I guess, to the end product or the usability of FutureFeed, depending on how you enter it?
No, but vendors, I guess, yeah, vendors, if I add a vendor here, l- let me go to a regular, like a service provider inventory item. I guess any of the inventory items, they all have the same.
To be more of like a
Down
supplier,
here.
like you buy widget components from.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So Summit 7 is the vendor of your cloud environment. They're reselling that cloud environment. But then they're also providing managed services for you, so they'd be an MSSP too. So I'd create an entry for both of them. But when you do create a vendor entry, they'll show up in this drop down. You see inside the ticket. So if someone was giving me this file server, supplying it to me, then I would identify the vendor who it's coming from, and any of these entries are associated with, you have to create them over under the vendor field here.
Is there a field, or is there, and maybe this is something that we'll go over for the next three modules, but where would subcontractors go? Is it
Um,
just fall under contracts?
yeah, I would just do service providers. I would do service providers. But yeah, you would have a contract with them, so you'd log that contract as well in the contracts area. But if they're, um, if they have computer assets that they're touching and things that they're working on, then you would add them as an asset. But if you're just trying to depict that uh,
Right, that
you
we've got it. They have a contract to
then,
build some
well,
part of our widget, and maybe we're sharing CUI or FCI with them.
that would just be in the contracts part, yeah. In the tools and in this area, this tools area is you're only defining what's in your assessment scope. The subcontractors would have their own boundary that would need to be compliant, so that wouldn't be part of your boundary. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Yep. All right, and I gotta drop. I'm really behind on my next meeting, but I did see in the chat someone asked if I had a list for the most common tasks that should be listed. I do not have that put together. And also, the day and time of the Thursday session is every Thursday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time, and to register for it, you just click on the register link at the bottom of the future feed page. Any other questions? Okay. All right. Well, thank you for your time, and I will see you in the next training session, or feel free to take this one again if you need to. Give it about an hour as soon as I end the call, and you'll get a link to the recording.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye.